So I am Jamie Smithson, and I'm with Belmont Village of Westlake Hills. Thank you all for joining today. This talk is being done in partnership with our Lakeway community. Between our two communities, we offer all spectrums of senior living, from independent to assisted, with some very specialized memory care programs. If you have questions about either of our communities, please let me know and I'll get you all the information that you need. For today's talk, we have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Sherrie D. Dr. All is passionate about empowering people to use their brains brilliantly to live better, lead better, and love better. She's an international speaker, writer, licensed clinical neurorehabilitation psychologist, brain health expert, and the owner and director of the Chicago Center for Cognitive Wellness. Her forthcoming book, The Neuroscience of Memory, is due out in early 2021 and is the first in a series of neuroscience books that inspire purpose, leadership, and spectacular living. And I found Dr. All as she did a talk for one of our Belmont villages in the Chicago area, and I absolutely loved the entire session that she did, so I was able to get her information and have her present for us today. So I will let her begin. Dr. All, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie. It's my pleasure to be in Texas. So I grew up in southeastern Oklahoma, so I'm fond of those parts of the world, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and so we can kind of go through these slides. And so Jamie had asked me to talk about taking charge of your memory. I actually do have a couple of young people who live in this house with me too. So give me just 1 second. We have a quick visitor. Okay, don't come back, please. All right, so take charge of your memory. So a little bit about me, and we can stay connected if you'd like. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Here's my email address. Jamie did mention that I have a book that's coming out early next year. The whole thing has been written. There's a lot of editing that needs to happen in the meantime, but it's actually a workbook designed for really anybody who would like to improve their memory skills. And so be sure to check that out. If you would like to be on my email list for hold on just a second.
And while we're waiting for her to get back, I failed to mention, we'll be using the chat feature. So if anyone has any questions during her presentation, please feel free to pop it over in the chat. And then when we get to the end, I'll go through and make sure that we address all of those. And if we do have some time, we might be able to also do a little bit of discussion at the end.
Okay, great. I feel like Jimmy Fallon with the kids coming in. And I'm really, thank you, Laura, Jamie, that gives us a good opportunity to kind of put that together. So I appreciate that. Any other housekeeping that we missed?
Okay. I don't think so, not off the top of my head.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So anyway, so if you'd like to be on the email list I can shoot you an email early next year whenever the book comes out. You can just shoot me an email here at Saul, that's my first initial last name. My last name really is All, like the detergent, at cogwellness.com. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about why you came here today. So we are facing a major public health crisis in the United States, as well as most other post-World War II industrialized countries. And it's not COVID, even though, you know, we're all dealing with that at the moment. But coming into the COVID-19 pandemic, and with any luck, once this is all over, really the most expensive health condition that most countries are facing is dementia. And so we're expecting that dementia cases are likely to triple over the next 30 years as baby boomers kind of start to age into the age range where developing dementia is at your higher risk for that. So in an effort to kind of affect this public health challenge, we're working to try to do what we can to either help people lower the risk for dementia or, or delay its onset. And so one of the biggest ways to do that is to actually help people understand your cognitive health. And so I wanted to give you this little graph here. So this is a representation of a really like bona fide scientific theory that exists that I think is really the foundation of brain health and how to take care of your memory and really take charge of your memory. Because there's a lot more that we can do to improve and maintain and hold on to our memories than we ever used to think before. And so the title of this talk is to take charge of your memory. And this model is really kind of the foundation for how to do that. So about the year 2000, a neuropsychologist named Yakov Stern published a couple of papers that really kind of summarized a lot of research that we were seeing throughout the 1990s about people who had about the relationship between what your brain looked like and what your cognitive symptoms looked like. And we were noticing that there wasn't a lot of relationship between what your brain looked like and how you were doing cognitively and functionally kind of in your daily life. There were a lot of studies around the time that were showing that there were people who had large amounts of Alzheimer's disease pathology, like growing in their brains, at the same amount of somebody who had really advanced dementia, but these people were sharp as a tack. So despite the fact that there was, prolific Alzheimer's disease in their brains, cognitively and functionally, they were maintaining a lot of independence and they were doing really, really well. We were seeing similar things with people surviving strokes and traumatic brain injuries. And so taking all of this data together, Dr. Stern put out a theory that is called cognitive reserve. I call it your brain's 401k account because it's quite literally your brain's retirement account. And basically what it means is that among those people that we were seeing who were really kind of surviving the effects of Alzheimer's disease, what did differentiate them from people who were having a lot of memory problems was the fact that they actually had more brain left over. So the people who were maintaining their cognitive skills, they had larger brain volumes, their brains were heavier if we weighed them. If we did kind of a count of the number of brain cells in their brains, they had more brain cells. So they basically had more brain cells kind of stored in their brain bank that sort of helped them sort of resist or kind of ward off the effects of dementia. So if you have more brain cells or skills stored in your brain bank, then you have more to lose before you kind of cross over this dementia threshold, which is where you start showing, signs of memory loss that are bad enough to get in your way or kind of keep you from being able to do your everyday kinds of things. And so I do have another talk where we can talk more about some of the lifestyle aspects, because there are ways that you can actually actively invest in your brain 401k throughout your entire life. A couple of take homes from that are some things that may actually surprise you, like being more physically active will help you grow more brain cells, and then you can kind of beef up your brain 401k throughout your entire life. I talk about this quite a bit in the book too. It's kind of sort of the foundation for that. But another way to invest in your brain 401k is through mental activities and using your brain. So we've learned a lot over the last 20, 30 years about brain cells that fire together, wire together. And the more you use your brain, the more resistant you are going to be to losing some of those brain cells. There's this concept of use it or lose it. And so if we keep our brains active and using them as much as we can, then we can kind of keep those pathways healthy and built up and help you kind of build and maintain your brain 401k. And so I'm here today to kind of give you my top 7 memory strategies to help you kind of beef up using your memory over, over the course of your life, and to help you kind of build up your brain 401k. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, so these are the kind of 7 most commonly researched strategies for people to use to improve your memory. And the first one doesn't even have anything to do with memory from a neuroscience standpoint, but we actually need to beef up another cognitive skill, which is attention. So because memory doesn't work in a vacuum, you can't expect yourself to remember anything that you never paid attention to in the first place, right? I think that probably makes sense. But a lot of times, so I mean, we're really hard on our memories. We kind of expect a lot out of our memories. And a lot of the time we complain about having memory problems when we're just too preoccupied or zoned out or worried or anxious or distracted to be able to, remember what's happening in any given moment. And so attention is really like the gateway to your memory. Your memory is only as good as your attention, because again, you can't possibly expect yourself to remember things that you never noticed in the first place. So that's memory strategy number 1. Here are some techniques for that. So, first of all, let's just start, look around. A lot of times we get kind of tunnel vision. We end up spending a lot of time on our phones. Knowing, even there's been studies about if people even have a phone sitting on the table while they're having a meal with someone, that they tend to be, significantly more distracted throughout that meal. So, so just encourage, remembering and reminding yourself to kind of look up and around and take in the environment when you're out for a walk, which you're probably not doing a lot of these days in Texas. It's too damn hot, right? So, but when you're able to, or when you're in any kind of environment, just try to look around and take it in. I have on here number 2 is effort. This idea of, I love the term pay attention, right? Like literal money being exchanged, that attention requires effort. A lot of times we're not paying attention because we're just, either lazy or distracted or whatever. So, teaching yourself to put in the effort. Sometimes we need to even bribe ourselves. So setting up some sort of a reward situation, like, okay, I'm going to focus really hard on this news article and I'm going to take it in and really try to remember what it says. And then once that's over, then I'll reward myself by, I don't know, surfing the internet or something pleasurable like that, right? Another tip is to, manage your environment. A lot of times we get frustrated about our memories when we've got a lot of stuff going on in the background, like the TV's on and you're not hearing what your partner's saying to you, those sorts of things. Really important to try to do one thing at a time. We like to think that we can multitask, but multitasking is a myth. Your brain really can't maintain focus on more than one thing at a time. And when we think that we're multitasking, what we're actually doing is shifting our attention back and forth between whatever's going on. And there's some interesting studies that have been done in college students where they would have them come in and sit down on a computer and do sort of a single task and, kind of measure their reaction time and see how they did. And then they would give them kind of a dual task where they would have to multitask, and their performance dropped by almost a full IQ range. So they went from maybe what you would consider normal IQ to kind of below average or mildly mentally retarded range. So by about 15 IQ points. And so that's happening to college students. Kind of imagine, what's happening to us as we try to multitask, you're losing information. That decline in performance was about the same as being high on pot. So multitasking really can rob your attention very quickly. And one other thing to think about in terms of being able to pay attention are any kind of sensory changes that you might be having, particularly hearing and vision. I know that, those things can creep up on us kind of out of the blue. And sometimes, especially vision can kind of, change pretty quickly. So making sure you're getting regular vision and hearing checks. I know it's tough when we're in the middle of a pandemic. So maybe we have a little bit of grace for ourselves at this point, but certainly, you know, keeping up with those regular appointments, wearing the hearing aids, all very important. Because again, you can't expect yourself to remember something that you didn't notice in the first place. Okay, so my second memory strategy is a pretty interesting one. So I don't know if you knew this, but we have two sides to our brains. We have, you know, two different hemispheres, and the hemispheres actually perform different functions. So the left hemisphere is really specialized for language-based and auditory types of information. And we have a whole memory center that's on the left side, specialized for language and auditory types of memory. And that's all it does. On the right side, we have a whole other memory center that only helps you remember visual information coming in through your eyeballs. So we're such a literate society where we talk to each other, we write things down, we read, we type emails, we communicate verbally and auditorily so much that sometimes we forget that we have this whole other right hemisphere visual memory center. And it's arguable that we've actually had that memory center longer, because you remember cavemen, they didn't really like talk to each other, but they knew where all the berries were, right? So we've had visual memory as a species longer than we've had language-based memory, but we tend to underutilize it these days because we are so reliant on our language-based memory. So one really great way to help you kind of get a better use of your memory is to co-opt this other memory center that's sort of sitting there by learning how to visualize and practicing visualization strategies. So I've got a couple of techniques here. So one is Gary Small is a neurologist at UCLA. He runs a big memory disorders center there, and he has this whole series of books called the Memory Bible and the Longevity Bible. And so he has a technique. His memory technique is what he calls see, snap, connect, and we're actually covering all three of his techniques. We just talked about pay attention, so that's sort of the see part, like pay attention, look. The snap is sort of this part, taking a mental snapshot. And so he'll talk about, you park in a parking garage and you're on level 2B. And so you look at the sign and then you take a mental snapshot, just like you would be, snapping a photo, and then connect that back to something, which we'll talk a little bit more about connecting here in a minute. That's another one of my strategies. So mental snapshots, like how often do you kind of look at something and go, okay, I'm really going to remember that that's there, and kind of, take like a mental snapshot, and you can close your eyes and then sort of see the representation of what that is. I use this one a lot in remembering where I put my cell phone. Because that's like a big issue in my house. I have this whole conversations where like, I'll ask my husband, can you go get my cell phone? And you're like, sure, where it is. I'm like, I don't know, and he doesn't want to go look for it, right? He kind of expects me to remember. So anyway, so to please him and also just to have a better memory, I've started using this strategy. So when I set my cell phone down and I take the time to think about it, I pay attention, I look at it, kind of take a little mental snapshot of, oh, it's, on the counter near the garbage can, or, oh, I left it, in the living room. So anyway, so these are some things that you can use. This Roman room method is a little bit more elaborate, but we're actually gonna practice it together. So there's this is a really old method. Actually, I think comes from the Greeks. I don't quite know why we call it the Roman room method, but the lore is that there was this Greek temple that collapsed, I think probably in like an earthquake or something. And so all the people were kind of sitting around trying to figure out like who, was affected, or who was, maybe still trapped in the rubble. And one of the Greek philosophers said, oh, I know who was in there. And he kind of like listed off all of these different people's names. And they're like, how did you know that? And so he said, well, I see them in there, and I just took a little bit of a tour of the palace, and saw all the different people who were in there. So he had kind of made a visual representation of all of these different people, sort of a list of people, and then he could kind of retrace that visual representation. This technique is also often called the memory palace. There's a book by Josh Foer, F-O-E-R, called Moonwalking with Einstein, where that talks about this technique. There's a guru named Tony Buzan who writes a lot about this technique. And this is the technique that these memory champions use to develop amazing memory skills. They kind of look like savants, but they're not. They're people who just kind of practice this technique over and over and over. And so then they'll meet up at like a conference at like a hotel ballroom, and they'll memorize decks of cards that are about this big, only looking at one at a time. And so anyway, so we're going to practice this technique so that you kind of get an idea of what it feels like. And I'm going to have you memorize a list of brain healthy foods. So I'm going to tell you the list right now. And I want you to write, don't write it down, just, okay. So we're going to get 2 bags of leafy green vegetables, a quart of blueberries, 2 pounds of English walnuts, no, 1 pound of English walnuts. So, okay, let me start over. Okay, so we've got 2 bunches of salad greens, a quart of blueberries, a pound of English walnuts, 2 pounds of salmon, a quart of low-fat Greek yogurt, 2 bars of dark chocolate, and 3 bottles of red wine. You got it? You memorize that whole list? You're all set? Maybe not. I did go a little fast. Plus, I haven't given you the technique yet. So now what we're going to do is I want you to, you can close your eyes if you like, if you're comfortable. And I want you to visualize a place that a home that you're really familiar with. Maybe it's the home that you live in now, or the house that you grew up in as a child. And so kind of take that in, kind of, maybe do like a quick little tour of that home, like walk up the path, go through the front door, go down the hallway, look in all the rooms. And so then come back out to the front, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of this home, and we're going to plant really vivid visual images of each of those items on that shopping list throughout the path, throughout our memory palace here, okay? So you're out in the front yard, and you're kind of walking up to the path to the house, except that it's not kind of open and breezy. It's, you're having to walk through all these really overgrown salad greens that are completely in your way, and you have to, push them out of the way, or maybe you have a machete and you kind of chop one leaf down, and then as soon as you get one out of the way, like another one kind of slaps you in the face, and so you're just fighting your way through these salad greens. And you make your way through all of those, and you get up to the front porch, but blocking your way into the front porch is a giant hot tub sized container of blueberries. And these aren't just like little blueberries, these are like blueberries. And there are 2 little kids inside of the hot tub, like taking these blueberries and smashing them over each other's heads. And so you try to like, shimmy past the blueberries without getting, stains on your clothes, and you kind of finally make it in through your front door. And as soon as you get inside, you walk in, and then you're greeted by a man-sized English walnut. So he's got an English walnut for its face, and he's dressed like one of the guards at Buckingham Palace because he's English, right? And he puts his hand out, and he's, you have to pay me £1 to be able to come through into your childhood home. And so you pay the walnut, and then you make your way into the living room. And in the living room, there's one of those old tube TVs that, it has it's a big square, and it's got the big vent on the back, where it lets off the heat from the tube of the TV, not one of these fancy flat screens that we have now. And laying on that vent is a giant 2-pound salmon, but not like a nice salmon fillet cooking on the grill. No, it's just like a, you know, a salmon right out of the water. It's got that ugly mouth, and it's laying on the back of this TV, and it's heating up, and it's starting to stink. And so, and then you make your way down the hallway, and you pass whatever that first room is there, and you kind of peek in, and, you know, maybe it's a bathroom or a bedroom, and inside that room is another big hot tub sized container full of yogurt. And there is a Greek god or goddess you're choosing. You get to choose the gender that appeals to you. Maybe it's a little sexy, you know, and it's skinny. This god or goddess is skinny because it's low fat Greek yogurt. It's kind of bathing in the yogurt. And then you go down the hall to the next room, and maybe it's a bedroom, and laying on the bed are these 2 life-sized bars of dark chocolate. And, you know, to really drive this home, maybe, you know, maybe they grow eyes and they like look at you, and like one of them sits up to kind of look at you. We're making these dramatic because that helps with your memory. And then you make your way into the kitchen, and you open up the refrigerator, and inside the refrigerator are 3, you know, very large bottles of red wine that also have eyes, and they're whining. You know, maybe they're whining because they're red wine. They don't want to be in the refrigerator. Okay, so you quickly close the refrigerator, and then there you are. Okay, so I'm gonna take. Well, let's see. Can we? Does anybody want to come off mute and be a tell us the list? Let's see if you learned it.
Okay, I just made it where you guys can unmute yourself. Come on, someone volunteer. Take a walk through your house.
Okay, I got it. You should be able to hear me now, right?
Yeah, we can hear you, Joe. Go for it.
Okay, good. So we got the salad greens. We got the blueberries. I'm not giving you any quantities because I didn't work on quantities. We got the Greek yogurt. We got the chocolate. We got the salmon. And that's all I can remember.
Who was greeting you at the door?
Oh yeah, the English walnut guy.
Ooh. Sorry about that. You were muted somehow.
That's okay. Oh, I was muted. Oh, okay. I think we met. What was in the refrigerator?
I don't go in refrigerators. There's nasty stuff in there.
Where the wine is, Joe. You want to go in there.
I would think in Texas, you'd want to be standing in front of the refrigerator all the time. All right, does anybody want to help? That was really great, Joe. Let's give him a hand. So I don't know if nobody can really see or hear you, but a good, excellent. So that, I mean, but I think it was easier, right, to remember by kind of doing this visualization. So great. Thank you for being a good sport, Joe. And okay, so that's the visualization strategy. Let's get to some more. So next is, number 3 is to actually get organized. So just like memory doesn't function in isolation from attention, you know, like memory requires good attention skills to work well. Your memory also needs other types of cognitive skills to work well. There's a group of cognitive skills that we call executive function skills, and they're kind of things that like the front of your brain is sort of in charge of. And these are, you know, executive functions or anything that a CEO would do for a company, you know, because like your frontal lobes are kind of like the CEO of your brain. And so these are things like organizing, planning, those sorts of things. And so the quicker that you can organize information and kind of maybe get it down into like smaller parts or different organization strategies, then the faster you and more efficiently you're going to be able to remember things. So not only just getting organized, even also organizing your space will help you remember where things are. So like when my house is cleaner, I don't lose my phone as often as you know, when there's like a lot of clutter. But let's talk a little bit about organizing information to kind of get it into your mind. And so a really common and very effective a memory strategy that we teach on a regular basis is this idea of chunking. And so chunking is really like taking a large amount of information and trying to squish it down into smaller bits. So a good example of this would be, you know, that phone numbers are already chunked. They come that way, right? Because you've got the area code, and then you've got the prefix, and then you've got, you know, kind of the extension. And so if you can get numbers down into little chunks of about, you know, maybe actually about 2 to 3 digits. So a lot of times if we're teaching chunking for phone numbers, then we will go ahead and split up the extension into little pairs, you know, like 7850 is, you know, like the end of my phone number. So, and you know, I'm finding that one of the challenging things about all of this Zoom stuff is that not every Zoom meeting ID is presented in sort of a chunked way, right? It's like this one long 9-digit or 10-digit number, and so anyway, so chunking is helpful because then you just have to learn those little bits. That's sort of how we do that. And another way to chunk is for verbal information is to categorize. And so if you can, you know, organize your shopping list by section of the grocery store or by aisle, then, you know, then you only have to, you know, so then the section of the grocery store sort of, it can function like a stem for a broader category, right? So that you have all those items from, let's say the stem is produce, you know, that's the chunk, it's produce. And then within the category of produce, you have all the different items that you're going to get: onions and apples and pears and potatoes. So categorizing can be really effective. And we notice that when people take our memory tests, we give memory tests where we kind of give people lists of words and then have them memorize them. And the faster that they can kind of catch on that maybe there are some categories that they can sort of chunk the words into, then they actually do a lot better on those memory tests. So not that I'm teaching to the test necessarily, but you know, these are just really effective strategies that you can try to use on a day-to-day basis. Even if you can't categorize on the fly, then, you know, one thing that's helpful is to just write it down, and then maybe you can kind of organize it after you sort of see the information in writing. So, okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, this is, so I kind of already mentioned this earlier when I was talking about Dr. Gary Small's technique of see, snap, connect. So this is, so link it. Link it is kind of like connecting information. So there are a couple of different ways to link things. So I'm actually going to work a little backwards on this slide. So one thing you can do is that you can link information back to something you already know. I do this when I'm trying to memorize names. So, you know, if I meet a new Amy, then I think about all the other Amy's I know, and I sort of try to, you know, combine them together. I'll make it a link between new Amy and old Amy. And I even kind of, sometimes I'll think of it as like a file cabinet, and I'll put the new Amy in the Amy file. You don't have to get all that elaborate, but kind of linking something back to something you already know. Okay, now I'm going to go back up here. So this is called this working memory. This is a cognitive skill that is really kind of like the intersection between attention and long-term memory. And actually working memory is now just the new short-term memory. We, you know, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, we would talk about short-term memory, and short-term memory is actually really, really short. It's not sort of what we think about as like memory for recent events. It's all kind of long-term memory. We can get into the nuances of that, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But short-term memory actually maxes out at about 30 seconds. So really any memory that you have had longer than 30 seconds is in neuroscience terms, we would call that a long-term memory. So working memory is sort of that 30-second platform where you kind of hold information in your mind, you know, just long enough to be able to kind of do something with it. Like write it down or punch the phone number into your phone or maybe calculate the tip on a bill. So you got to like kind of do something with it, or if you get distracted, it just goes away, right? So so working memory really has limited capacity. It's not infinite, the number of things that we can kind of hold in our short-term or working memory at one time. And if we overload the system, then we're gonna like forget things. And so, but it's also this beautiful platform where you can do the work of linking and even do the work of categorizing and the work, some of the work of the visualization strategies, because it is sort of this little platform where you can kind of hold information and manipulate it in some way. And so when I'm hearing the name Amy, and then I'm thinking about all the old Amy's that I know and kind of making that association, I'm doing that in my working memory. I'm sort of working with the new memory to kind of help myself build and encode a new long-term memory about the fact that this woman's name is Amy. So a couple of other techniques that are kind of helpful for when you're trying to do linking is to try to attach some personal meaning to whatever it is that you're trying to remember, you know, whether it's like maybe something abstract, you know, you're learning about, you know, somebody's giving you directions to go somewhere, then, you know, if you if you can do anything with like the numbers, like if it represents like your anniversary or like a, you know, like a special number that you like, or it kind of, you know, add some personal meaning to it, then that can be helpful together also. And then another way to link and use that to your advantage is to link the details about current memories together. So giving memories some context, some flavor, some, you know, what is detail. So, you know, today is Thursday, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's hot outside because it's July, and we're doing this memory talk, and you know, so add some colorful details, like I'm in Chicago, you're in Texas, those sorts of things. Okay, so that's number 4. We just have a couple more to go. So so another good memory technique is this idea of mindfulness. Now, mindfulness, you know, you've probably heard of, it's kind of all the rage these days. It's, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it is, but sort of in a nutshell, it's a kind of a form of meditation, some meditation practices that have kind of come from like the Eastern world and are brought to sort of our Western culture and taught. And there's so many benefits to mindfulness, not just stress reduction, but also mindfulness is a really very effective attention training strategy. And so so anyway, but you're like, well, what does it have to do with memory? Well, mindfulness you can use to help you make high definition memories. And so I'm gonna tell you a little story. So back, oh gosh, how long ago was this? Maybe close to 15 years ago, when high definition TVs first came out. This, you know, maybe like what, 2000 and I don't know, probably 2005. So yeah, about 15 years ago. So my husband wanted to get a high definition TV. He was so excited. He's like, he got a second job. He made a bunch of, I was in grad school at the time. So he got a second job. He saved up all of his money. And so he went out and he bought his high definition TV. He brought it home, he like put it on the wall, he turned it on, and it looked like garbage. It looked, the screen and the picture were just so disappointing. Everything was sort of like weird, kind of garbledy, and all these weird colors kind of going together. And you're like, what is this? This is not beautiful. Like, why are people spending so much money to like upgrade to a high definition TV? Well, so he calls up, we had DirecTV at the time. And so he calls up DirecTV and he's like, what is the deal? They're like, oh yeah, you have to pay extra to get a high definition signal sent to your TV. And he's like, oh, okay. So, so we agree, we pay the $5 extra a month, in order to get a high definition signal into the TV, and then it's beautiful, and the rest is history. So, so this is what you need to think about, that mindfulness helps you have high definition memories, because the more that you are open and aware and paying attention, and you're kind of in the present moment, and you're pulling in more bits of data, and you have more definition of what it is you're trying to remember kind of coming into your brain. And that way, and that gives your memory the opportunity to kind of encode more things, more details about what it is that you're trying to remember. So now that we've told you why mindfulness matters for memory, let me talk a little bit more about what mindfulness is. So this is Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness. He's one of the psychologists who brought mindfulness into the American culture, and then and they've been doing amazing outcome studies on what mindfulness can do for your body, your brain. We are remolding brains through mindfulness. But he has a really simple definition that most people kind of quote, and I think it's really helpful and instructive in kind of like telling, because when you don't know kind of how simple mindfulness actually is, it seems like this, woo, like what is this thing about? Okay, so it's basically, number one, paying attention on purpose. So you're choosing to, you're intending, you're making the decision to pay attention to the present moment, and we'll talk more about why that's important. Non-judgmentally, and this one's really important, because if you are practicing mindfulness, so you're going to try to pay attention to something, in the present moment, and like, let's say you're going to choose to pay attention to your breathing. And so you're like, I'm paying attention to my breathing in and out. But then your mind is gonna wander, because our minds are active. They're very busy. They want to solve problems and do all this stuff. And so when your mind wanders, instead of going, oh, I'm such a terrible meditator, and then like giving up, you practice the non-judgmental piece, and you're like, okay, well, there goes my mind wandering. I'm not going to get mad at myself. I'm just going to like bring my attention back. And so you just gently, non-judgmentally keep refocusing your attention on what it is that you're trying to pay attention to in the present moment. And so you can see just from even that description how mindfulness is attention training, bringing it back. So let's talk a little bit about the present moment and why it's so important. Well, for one thing, you cannot remember things if you're not there, right? Anybody ever take a shower and you like get out of the shower and like, oh, did I wash, XYZ kind of thing, right? Because, what do you do in the shower? You're like rarely actually like mentally in the shower, right? We're usually like thinking about what we're going to do today, or, rehashing some old argument. So if your mind is in the future or the past, then it's actually pretty hard to pay attention to things that are happening in the present moment. So that's number one. Because if your mind is in the future or the past, you're not in the present, you're not going to notice all of those important attention things that are going to help you remember. But there are also some emotional benefits to being in the present moment also, because unless you're on fire, most of the time, the present moment, not that bad. Most of our misery comes from being either in the future or in the past. And so when your thoughts are in the future, those tend to be the quality of thoughts that we would call worry, the what ifs. What if I get COVID? What if, the economy collapses? What if, my kids have to go back to school? or don't go back to school or whatever, right? And so, and then the feeling that kind of goes with that is anxiety, fear, right? So when we're in the future, we often have a lot of angst. When our thoughts are in the past, that tends to be a little bit more of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, like, oh, I should have said that, or, those sorts of things. And so that thought process, we would call more like rumination. And the feeling that goes with rumination very often is depression, feeling sad, shoulda, coulda, woulda, you're hard on yourself. And so by keeping your focus in the present moment, there's also a lot of emotional release that can come from that, because you're not creating negative feelings in your body and in your brain, by your own creation. So, okay. So what does mindfulness look like? There are bajillions of ways to practice mindfulness. And you don't, gosh, I mean, so, I have to admit this, for many years, I kind of didn't even want to talk about mindfulness because I could not do this. In fact, I still don't do this. So I was actually reading a book that Jon Kabat-Zinn had written with his wife. And when she admitted that she had never had like a sitting meditation practice in her entire life, I was like, oh, thank God. Right. So anyway, so there are many, many ways to practice mindfulness without, sitting on a rock or a yoga block or, whatever. So you can practice mindfulness while walking. You can, be just paying attention to all of the lovely things that are outside, the sunshine, the fresh air, the birds singing. And actually you can mindfully do anything. This is actually the first thing that I ever tried, because I'd been hearing about mindfulness. And this is when my oldest daughter was a baby. I had this obsession. I had to wash her bottles by hand. I don't know why. Now after I have four now. So, in hindsight, I'm like, well, that was kind of silly, but first time mother kind of thing. Right. And I would just, I hated doing it. So one time I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try to do this 100%. I'm going to be in it, because that's what they talk about in mindfulness. You're completely in the task. You're bringing yourself to every bit of it. You're paying attention to every element, the water on your hands, the motion of, scrubbing the bubbles, the rhythm of sort of pouring out and rinsing the bottles. And I actually started enjoying doing it. So, so there's lots of ways that you can practice that way. There are also lots of traditions. So this loving kindness meditation is sort of a mantra that you would use to, wish well to yourself and to other people. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be free of suffering. I've heard different versions of that, but you kind of start with yourself, and then you start with people you like, and then maybe neutral things, and maybe you even work your way up to people you don't like. Centering prayer is I think actually a Jesuit tradition of kind of another sort of kind of present moment focused type of practice that's, from a different faith tradition. Martha Beck is a writer who has some wonderful books, and she talks about this idea of wordlessness, that maybe, meditation doesn't have to be all fancy, sitting on a rock. Sometimes it's just turning off your chatter brain and just sort of being in wordlessness, that can bring a lot of relief and kind of connection to the world. And she talks about, one person, they sort of do this by like dancing to like rave music. So maybe that's a way to practice mindfulness. Okay, two more, and then we'll do some questions. So my number 6 strategy is external memory aids. So just getting stuff out of your memory, right? Like writing things down. It keeps you organized. It can definitely declutter your brain. Writing things down can help you memorize things, because you can kind of, make the list and then like study the list. Calendars, so important. And, don't beat yourself up if you are not using the most ideal calendar system for yourself at this point, or even any calendar. I have found that as life changes, our calendaring habits can really change with it, right? So when you're in a phase of life where, you know, you're busy working, you're like, I can't live without my calendar. I'm completely devoted to my calendar. And like, you have like a really great calendar habit. But I've noticed this about myself. I go on vacation, no calendar. You know, in this pandemic, we, in our family, we have like a big dry erase calendar in our kitchen to keep track of like kid activities and things like that. So we have to write in the months, right? And I think currently it says May and June. So we're in the middle of July, right? So we've kind of abandoned that calendar because it's just not, you know, it's not useful at this point. So if you're having trouble remembering appointments though, like this, you know, investing in a calendar habit that works for your current lifestyle can really help you with your memory. And so we do a lot of this clinically when we're working with folks who want to improve their memory. We help them like find the right calendar for their lifestyle at that point, and then help them kind of develop systems around using it and helping them remember. Oh, and then I love this idea of can't miss reminders. This comes out of a cognitive training manual that we use in my clinic a lot. And this would be like putting, you know, a note that's sort of obvious that, you know, you can't miss it, and or even like hanging the bag of things that you need to take the next time you leave the house, like hanging it on the doorknob. But my favorite example is, you know, that you take a note, put a note on the coffee pot that says, you know, feed the dog. Because I know about me, I am never going to forget to make coffee in the morning, but I might forget to feed the dog. So, okay. And then my number 7 strategy is rehearsal. We have to practice the things that we want to memorize. And I'm saying it like this on purpose because believe me, people talk to me about memory all the time because, and also they get a real kick out of when I forget things. We're hard on our memories. We expect way too much out of our memories. We expect ourselves to remember like every detail of everything, even after only hearing or thinking about it once. So give yourself a break. Remind yourself that you need to rehearse, especially as you get older. So, you know, as people get older, memory performance declines. I hate to break it to you, but we all of us, our memory peaked at about age 25 and it's been downhill since then. So if things seem like they're not as good as they used to be, then it's because they're not, right? Okay, but that doesn't mean that as we get older, we can't remember things. We can learn new things, but it takes a few extra repetitions to kind of learn that new thing. I put the ballerina here because I like to say that no self-respecting ballerina would ever expect herself or himself to memorize a new dance by only like hearing or seeing it once, right? We need to practice. So we need to practice our memory strategies. We need to rehearse whatever it is that we're trying to memorize, like drill yourself, you know, quiz yourself, you know, do it over and over. And that way your memory centers have, you know, more of a chance to be able to kind of do their job. Okay. That's what I got. So, so if you want to follow, again, you know, follow me on social media, shoot me emails, let me know if you want to be on my email list for my book. I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'll leave these up here for now, but so Jamie, I'm going to pitch it to you. Do we have wonderful questions that I can answer?
Yeah, guys, everyone has the ability to unmute themselves to ask a question or to put it in the chat box. And so feel free to do so. But Dr. All, I can tell you with like the mindfulness piece, I am incapable of shutting off my brain. And kind of when you were talking about how really trying to feel what's happening in the moment, I ride horses and I actually do it competitively. And I've always kind of said that the horses is my therapy because when I'm riding, I have to feel the rhythm. I have to feel the step. I have to be in the moment thinking about adjustments. And it's the only time when I think I'm actually shutting my brain off because I have no room in anything else but for what I'm doing in that moment. So I think like the way that people achieve mindfulness can probably look a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. so many different ways. And I think it's really personal to each of us. So I love that you shared that example of riding horses. And when I forgot to mention too, that like, it's okay to do mindfulness meditations, like with training wheels. I use recorded meditation recordings like all the time. That's my main practice. I use this app called Insight Timer. It's like Insight, and timer makes it sound like a, you know, a meditation timer where it's like bong, you know, like now meditate, right? I feel like there's a lot of pressure with that. But it wasn't until I learned that they actually have about 20,000 free guided meditations, like as part of this free app. And so I use it pretty regularly to kind of, you know, to have somebody kind of lead me with that, because you're right. It and it's also, I think, maybe a little intimidating to try to be alone with your thoughts. So thanks for sharing that, Jamie.
Yeah, I also used the Headspace app for a period of time, and that one was really good. And they actually had guided meditations for falling asleep. Those were super, super interesting.
Yeah, those are really great. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question before we end, please feel free. We are going to have Dr. All do another presentation for us in September. So if you enjoyed her content and her enthusiasm for what she does today, please feel free to join us again in September. Also, I'll take the chance to talk about our speaker next week. And again, please interrupt me if anyone has a question. We are going to have Dr. Chris Johnson with Texas State University come and give a talk on Alzheimer's dementia and his theory of it being a trip through time. So he doesn't like to call when someone kind of regresses, because that has a negative connotation. He prefers to think of it as if they're actually time traveling. So it's a very interesting theory. If any of you were here last year when he gave his talk, he's a great speaker. So he will be our speaker in 2 weeks for that event. But it looks like we have a quiet crowd, which is fine. So Dr. All, I just want to thank you for being here with us. And I certainly enjoyed that and got some good snippets, and I will go forward in the day and try and put some of those things into practice. So thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My pleasure.
All right, you'll have a great week.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.